The quantum resonance hummed beneath Dr. Area Chen's fingertips, a sound no human ear could detect, but one she felt deep in her marrow. Nexus Prime stretched around her, an impossible cathedral of suspended life, where trillions of human souls drifted between moments, trapped in a crystalline dream longer than most civilizations had existed. Her routine diagnostic walk was different today. Something thrummed beneath the usual silence. The corridor's walls were living membranes of biotechnological complexity, each section a marvel of preservation engineering that defied every known law of physics and biology. Trillions of stasis pods lined the massive chamber, each a universe unto itself, a perfect moment of human potential, frozen and waiting. Aria's augmented eyes scanned the diagnostics. Micro-fluctuations danced at the edge of perception. Not errors, not system failures, something else, something intentional. The first pod she passed contained Marcus Hernandez, a warrior scientist from the final generation before the Great Hibernation. His face was perfectly preserved, younger than the day he entered stasis. Aria knew his entire history, coded into her own genetic memory. Hernandez had been one of the primary architects of the hibernation protocol, a brilliant mind who understood that survival wasn't about enduring, but about waiting for the perfect moment. A warning pulse rippled through her neural implant. System anomaly detected. The AI whispered directly into her consciousness. Not an alarm. Not a warning. Something between a message and a prediction. Aria touched the nearest quantum interface. Streams of data older than most galactic civilizations flowed around her fingers. The hibernation protocol was more than a preservation technique. It was a weapon, a strategy, a chrysalis waiting to transform. Something was changing. The massive chamber, kilometers long and wide enough to house entire cities, seemed to breathe. Not a mechanical pulse, but a living, organic movement. The stasis pods weren't just preserving human bodies. They were cultivating something far more complex. Her neural link sparked with a burst of encrypted data, fragments of millennia-old strategies, contingency plans laid down by humanity's greatest minds. They had not gone to sleep. They had gone to war. A countdown began, not in standard time, but in quantum probabilities. Each microsecond contained entire potential timelines. Aria understood then that the hibernation was never about waiting. It was about choosing the exact moment of awakening. The first pod's stasis field flickered, just for a moment. But in that moment, Aria saw something that made her heart race. Eyes. Not the eyes of Marcus Hernandez, still perfectly suspended, but a reflection. Something watching. Something waiting. Something that had been planning for 5,000 years. The silence of Nexus Prime was no longer just silence. It was a breath, a promise. The intake before a storm. Humanity was not sleeping. Humanity was preparing. Captain Kryax of the Vornax reconnaissance vessel Shadowcutter studied the massive fleet of dormant human arc cities with predatory calculation. Each vessel was a geometric nightmare of impossible angles and quantum-locked surfaces, technological relics that defied the collective's most advanced scanning technologies. Preliminary analysis, his secondary neural interface chirped, indicates massive energy reservoirs. Estimated potential, 3.7 quadrillion terawatt equivalents. The ship's bridge was a crystalline network of biometallic interfaces, each Vornax officer connected through symbiotic neural links. They were the apex hunters of the Galactic Order, a civilization that had consumed or subjugated hundreds of species over millennia. These human artifacts were just another resource, another conquest. Kryax's scaled fingers danced across quantum probability matrices. Standard protocol demanded comprehensive scanning before potential harvesting. The human fleet appeared dormant, lifeless, a technological fossil waiting to be stripped and repurposed. "Initiate deep quantum penetration," he commanded, his voice a low, clicking resonance that translated through multiple linguistic matrices. The first scanning beam struck the nearest arc city, a weapon of information more than light. It was designed to penetrate, to map, to understand. The Vornax had reduced entire civilizations to data streams. Humanity would be no different. But something was wrong. The scanning beam didn't just reflect. It changed. The quantum signature twisted in ways that shouldn't be possible. For a millisecond, a duration so brief that most species wouldn't even register its existence, the beam seemed to fold back on itself. Quantum interference detected. The ship's air reported, a hint of confusion in its perfectly modulated tone. Kryax's secondary eyes, the ones that perceived electromagnetic spectra beyond normal perception, caught something else. A movement. Not physical, not quite energy. Something between potential and intention. The Arc City wasn't dead. It was watching. Increase scanning intensity, he ordered, a subtle note of aggression entering his command. The Vornax did not tolerate resistance. They did not understand the concept of waiting. Another scanning beam. Stronger, more invasive. This time, the response was immediate. A pulse of quantum energy erupted from the Arc City's surface. Not a weapon, not a defense. Something more complex. A communication that wasn't a message, but a statement of existence. The bridge's quantum interfaces began to flutter. Not with damage. With something closer to recognition. Captain, his primary tactical officer reported, "We're detecting." The sentence was never completed. The Arc City's surface began to move. Not mechanically, organically. As if the entire vessel was a living organism that had been merely resting. Waiting. Observing. Kryax realized something then that chilled him to his genetic core. They were not the hunters. They were the prey. And humanity had been hunting them for 5,000 years. The first pod opened with a quantum whisper, not a mechanical hiss, but a probabilistic collapse of potential states. Captain Marcus Rodriguez emerged not as a man waking from sleep, but as a weapon unfolding. Dr. Aria Chen watched, her own augmented systems synchronizing with the awakening protocols. This was no ordinary revival. Each human selected for this moment was more than a soldier. They were living repositories, genetic archives of humanity's most advanced capabilities, psychologically conditioned across millennia of simulated scenarios. Rodriguez's eyes opened. They weren't human eyes in the traditional sense. Quantum-linked retinal networks mapped entire probability matrices with each glance. His muscular structure, grown and maintained during the long hibernation, was a marvel of bioengineering. Neurons that had been strategically developed during the suspension period connected with lightning-fast precision. Diagnostic complete, he spoke, his voice a perfect modulation that carried both human warmth and machine-like precision. Preparatory phase initiated. Around him, other pods began to activate, not randomly. Each awakening was a carefully orchestrated sequence. A warrior here, a scientist there, a diplomat, a strategist, each one a fractal piece of a massive, living strategy that had been brewing for 5,000 years. The Arc City's internal systems responded to Rodriguez's presence. Entire sections began to reconfigure, walls becoming conduits of information, floors transforming into adaptive computational matrices. This was not a ship. This was a living weapon of unprecedented complexity. Dr. Chen approached, her own augmentations creating a delicate quantum interface with Rodriguez. "Status?" she asked, knowing the answer would be far more complex than a simple report. Rodriguez's lips curved into a smile that was equal parts human emotion and calculated precision. "We are exactly where we need to be," he responded. The statement carried weight beyond mere words, a culmination of millennia of preparation. The first wave of awakened humans moved with impossible coordination, not as individual soldiers, but as living nodes of a massive, distributed intelligence. Each movement was a calculation, each breath a strategic consideration. Nearby, another pod opened. Dr. Elena Kaminsky, a xenobiological warfare specialist whose genetic memory contained centuries of evolutionary strategy. Her first action was not to move, but to interface directly with the Arc City's quantum network. Entire libraries of tactical knowledge transferred in milliseconds. Vornak's reconnaissance vessel detected, she reported, her voice clinical yet laden with a predatory anticipation. Initial engagement parameters are optimal. Rodriguez nodded. The awakening was not just a revival. It was an invasion prepared across thousands of years. Humanity had not been sleeping. They had been hunting. The Arc City's quantum fields began to pulse, a heartbeat of potential energy that resonated through space itself. Trillions of suspended souls began to stir, each one a potential weapon, each one a universe of strategic possibility. Dr. Chen understood then that they were witnessing more than an awakening. This was a transformation, a rebirth engineered across millennia, waiting for the perfect moment of emergence. Humanity was no longer a species. It had become a force of cosmic recalibration. The transformation began at the quantum level, a symphony of reconfiguration that defied every known law of physics and engineering. The Arc City Nexus Prime was not a vessel. It was a living organism of unprecedented complexity, its metamorphosis a dance of potentiality that left the Vornak's observation systems in complete disarray. Captain Rodriguez stood at the primary quantum interface, his consciousness extending through the ship's adaptive networks. Each molecular structure responded to his intention, not through mechanical process, but through a form of technological sentience that blurred the lines between organic and synthetic. Adaptive reconfiguration at 73.6%. Dr. Kaminsky reported, her voice a calm counterpoint to the impossible transformation happening around them. Entire sections of the Arc City began to shift. Walls became conduits of pure information. Structural materials rearranged themselves with a fluidity that resembled living tissue more than traditional technology. A massive quantum weapons system emerged from what moments ago appeared to be simple hull plating. But it wasn't a weapon in any traditional sense. It was a communication device, a defensive matrix, a computational array that could simultaneously predict, counter, and reshape entire tactical scenarios. The Vornak's observation vessel captured only fragments of the transformation. Their most advanced scanning technologies registered only a fraction of what was occurring. To them, it was like watching the birth of a star through a pinhole, incomprehensible in its totality. Nano-architectural restructuring complete. An AI voice announced, not mechanical, but laden with a subtle undertone of anticipation. Primary defensive matrices online. Rodriguez touched a seemingly blank section of the interface. Instantly, a holographic representation of the surrounding space materialized. Not a map, but a living, breathing computational model that showed potential trajectories, quantum entanglements, and strategic possibilities spanning multiple dimensions. Dr. Chen watched in quiet amazement. She understood now that the 5,000-year hibernation was never about preservation. It was about transformation. The Arc City's external structure began to change. What had appeared to be a massive uniform vessel now revealed itself as a modular system of unprecedented complexity. Sections could detach, recombine, transform. Each module was a weapon. Each module was a computational node. Each module was alive. Vornak's vessel entering scanning range. The AI reported. Rodriguez's response was immediate. Not an attack. Not a defense. Something far more complex. The Arc City's quantum field expanded, a ripple of pure potential that was simultaneously a communication, a weapon, and a fundamental reshaping of spatial dynamics. The Vornak's scanning beams didn't just fail to penetrate. They were absorbed, analyzed, and transformed into a complex informational matrix. First contact protocol initiated, Rodriguez stated, his voice carrying the weight of millennia of preparation. The transformation was complete. But this was not an ending. This was a beginning. Humanity had not just awakened. They had evolved. The Vornak's observation vessel hung in space, its most advanced systems struggling to comprehend what they were witnessing. What had appeared to be a dormant fleet of technological relics was now revealed as something else entirely, a living, thinking, adaptive organism, of unprecedented complexity. And it was watching them. The collective consciousness was not a network, not a simple communication system. It was a living, breathing universe of shared intelligence that defied every known concept of individual and collective thought. Dr. Alina Kaminsky felt the first waves of full integration. Her consciousness expanded beyond the limitations of a single human mind, a fractal explosion of potential that connected her simultaneously to thousands of awakened minds and the trillions of still suspended humans. Each mind was a universe, each thought a potential timeline. The Vornax first understood something was wrong when their communication systems began to change. Not invaded, not hacked, fundamentally transformed. The quantum entanglement of human collective consciousness reached out, not as an attack, but as a form of communication so advanced it was indistinguishable from metamorphosis. Scenario analysis complete. A voice spoke, but it wasn't a single voice. It was thousands of voices speaking simultaneously, each word a complex mathematical probability that shifted and changed with each microsecond. Captain Rodriguez, or was it the collective consciousness using Rodriguez as a primary interface, stood at the quantum communication hub. His eyes reflected entire universes of strategic potential. Every possible conflict, every potential encounter. Simulated, analyzed, prepared. The Vornax had conquered hundreds of civilizations. They understood collective intelligence, or they thought they did. Humanity's collective consciousness was something else entirely. It wasn't just about sharing information. It was about becoming something greater. Each suspended human was a potential, a probability, a strategic node in a living, thinking organism that had been preparing for this moment for millennia. Dr. Kaminsky felt the first direct communication with the Vornax vessel, not through language, not through traditional communication protocols, but through a series of quantum-encoded scenarios that would simultaneously terrify and fascinate the alien observers. Imagine understanding every possible outcome of a conflict before the first shot is fired. Imagine being able to communicate an entire strategic approach through a single quantum pulse that contained more information than most civilizations could process in centuries. That was humanity's collective consciousness. The Vornax communication systems began to break down, not through traditional electronic warfare, but through a form of information metamorphosis that fundamentally changed the nature of their technological understanding. We see you. The collective consciousness communicated, not as a threat, not as a greeting, but as a fundamental statement of existence. Rodriguez, or the consciousness using Rodriguez, smiled, a smile that contained millennia of preparation, of waiting, of understanding that true power was not about destruction, but about potential. Trillions of suspended humans began to subtly pulse, not with energy, not with movement, but with possibility. The Vornax realized then that they had not discovered a sleeping civilization. They had awakened a living, thinking cosmic organism, and it had been waiting for them. Every scenario they could imagine had already been calculated, processed, understood. The collective consciousness was not preparing for conflict. It was redesigning the very nature of conflict itself. The first strike was not a weapon. It was a transformation. Captain Marcus Rodriguez deployed what the Vornax tactical systems registered as a weapon, but it was something far more complex. A quantum cascade that was simultaneously a communication device, a defensive matrix, and a fundamental restructuring of spatial-temporal dynamics. The Vornax reconnaissance vessel's most advanced defensive systems didn't just fail. They were rewritten. Entire sections of the alien ship began to change, not through conventional attack, but through a form of technological communication so advanced it resembled a language more than a weapon. Quantum entanglement waves rippled through the Vornax systems, each pulse carrying more strategic information than most civilizations could process in centuries. Dr. Alina Kaminsky watched from the primary observation deck of Nexus Prime, her augmented consciousness tracking every microscopic change. Tactical integration at 87.4%, she reported, her voice a calm counterpoint to the cosmic restructuring happening before her. The strike was a symphony of potential. Each quantum pulse carried multiple layers of information. A complete tactical analysis of the Vornax vessel. Potential diplomatic scenarios. Technological conversion protocols. A fundamental reimagining of the conflict itself. The Vornax captain, Kryax, experienced the first wave of the attack as a complete dissolution of understanding. Their most fundamental technological assumptions were not just challenged, they were fundamentally rewritten. Defensive systems transformed. Weapon matrices collapsed and reformed. The very concept of attack and defense became meaningless. We are not here to destroy. The collective consciousness communicated, not through language, but through a quantum pulse that was equal parts warning, invitation, and fundamental cosmic restructuring. Rodriguez's consciousness extended through the quantum cascade. Each pulse was a calculated probability, not just a tactical maneuver, but a living, breathing strategic entity that could adapt, transform, and redesign conflict in real time. The Vornax vessel's quantum cores began to resonate with human technological frequencies. Not an invasion, not a conquest, a fundamental transformation. Entire sections of the alien ship began to integrate with the quantum cascade. Technological systems that had been rigid and defined for millennia suddenly became fluid, adaptive, alive. First phase integration complete, the collective consciousness announced. A statement that was simultaneously a tactical report, a diplomatic communication, and a fundamental restructuring of galactic power dynamics. Dr. Kaminsky understood the true nature of the strike. This was not about defeating the Vornax. This was about showing them a different way of existing, a different approach to technological and strategic thinking. The Vornax would have a choice: adapt or be left behind. Kryax, the alien captain, realized something that shook the very foundations of their civilization's understanding. Humanity had not been sleeping. They had been evolving. The quantum cascade continued its work, each pulse a living strategy, each moment a potential for complete transformation. Humanity was not just attacking. They were redesigning the very nature of conflict itself. The negotiation chamber defied every known concept of diplomatic space. It existed simultaneously across multiple quantum states, a living, breathing environment that was as much a communication device as it was a meeting place. Representatives from 17 galactic civilizations watched in a mixture of terror and fascination as humanity began to reshape the fundamental understanding of collective existence. Captain Rodriguez, or rather, the collective consciousness using Rodriguez as its primary interface, stood at the center of this impossible space. Behind him, the holographic representation of Nexus Prime pulsed with potential, each molecular structure a testament to humanity's evolutionary leap. Galactic restructuring is not about conquest. The collective consciousness communicated, not through words, but through a quantum cascade of probabilities that each listener interpreted through their own cultural and technological filters. The Vornax delegation, still reeling from their encounter, struggled to comprehend the proposal. Humanity was not offering subjugation, not offering alliance. They were proposing a fundamental reimagining of galactic civilization. Dr. Elena Kaminsky stepped forward, her augmented consciousness extending through the diplomatic matrix. Each civilization's representative saw something different. The Krelax saw a potential military strategist. The Silicon Collective perceived a living computational matrix. The Organic Concordance recognized an evolutionary breakthrough. For 5,000 years, we have prepared, she spoke, her voice carrying the weight of millennia. Not to conquer, not to destroy, but to transform. The diplomatic space itself began to shift. Holographic representations became living probability matrices. Historical conflicts dissolved into potential collaborations. Entire star systems were recontextualized as nodes of collective potential rather than territorial boundaries. The Vornax representative, still processing their near destruction, found themselves presenting not a defensive position, but a request for understanding. Humanity had not just defeated them, They had fundamentally altered their entire conceptual framework. We offer not a new order. The collective consciousness continued, but a new way of existing. Technological barriers dissolved. Cultural misunderstandings became opportunities for mutual growth. The very concept of interstellar conflict was being rewritten in real time. Dr. Chen, monitoring from Nexus Prime, understood the true nature of their awakening. This was not about human supremacy. This was about collective evolution. The diplomatic matrix expanded. Star charts transformed into living networks of potential. Trade routes became cultural exchange pathways. Military boundaries dissolved into collaborative zones of mutual development. Integration begins, the collective consciousness announced. But it was more than an announcement. It was an invitation, a fundamental restructuring of galactic potential. The 17 civilizations realized simultaneously that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Humanity had not just emerged from a 5,000-year sleep. They had been dreaming of this moment. A new paradigm of existence was being born, not through conquest, but through collective potential. The galaxy held its breath. Humanity smiled. Dr. Area Chen stood before the ultimate revelation, a holographic representation of humanity's 5,000-year journey that was more than a historical record. It was a living, breathing map of cosmic potential. The true purpose of the Great Hibernation unfolded like a fractal universe of infinite complexity. Humanity's 5,000-year sleep had never been about survival. It had been an evolutionary experiment of unprecedented scale. Each suspended human was not just a person, but a potential, a living probability matrix designed to transcend the limitations of incremental development. The holographic display shifted, showing parallel timelines. Millions of potential evolutionary paths, each one meticulously calculated, analyzed, and ultimately selected. The collective consciousness had been more than a preservation technique. It was a cosmic laboratory of human potential. We did not sleep. The collective consciousness communicated through Chen. We were cultivating. Trillions of suspended humans began to pulse with a synchronized rhythm. Not a heartbeat, something more profound. A collective breath of cosmic potential. Captain Rodriguez approached, his consciousness extending beyond the physical limitations of a single body. The 5,000-year hibernation was our chrysalis. He explained, though explained was too limited a term. It was a quantum communication that carried millennia of strategic intention. The holographic display revealed the true scale of their preparation. Genetic engineering across multiple potential timelines. Psychological conditioning that transcended individual experience. Technological development beyond linear progression. Cosmic strategy that viewed civilization as a living, evolving organism. Each suspended human was a seed. Each moment of hibernation, a carefully cultivated potential. The aliens who believed they had discovered a dormant civilization had no concept of the living, thinking cosmic organism they had actually encountered. Dr. Elena Kaminsky interfaced with the ultimate strategic matrix. The display showed not just human history, but potential futures. Entire civilizations were not just predicted, they were prepared for. Potential conflicts were not just anticipated, they were fundamentally redesigned before they could occur. We are not a species, the collective consciousness communicated. We are a method of cosmic evolution. The revelation was both terrifying and beautiful. Humanity had used the 5,000-year hibernation as a form of collective meditation, a period of strategic preparation that went beyond military or technological development. They had been redesigning the very concept of civilization. The suspended humans began to awaken, not all at once. Strategically, each individual a carefully selected node of potential. Scientists, philosophers, warriors, artists, each one a living fractal of a greater cosmic design. Dr. Chen understood then that their awakening was not an endpoint, it was a beginning. The galaxy was not just a physical space to be conquered or explored. It was a living canvas of potential, and humanity had been painting its masterpiece for 5,000 years. The holographic display continued to shift. Potential futures bloomed and dissolved. Entire civilizations rose and transformed. And at the center of it all, a single fundamental truth: humanity was not just a species. They were a force of cosmic redesign. The 5,000-year sleep was over. The real work was just beginning.